No spoilers ahead.
Vampires was John Carpenter's only financially successful movie of the 90s, and it was the last financially successful movie he ever directed. When it was released in 1998, critics loved it or loathed it. Some people labeled it nasty fun and nightmarishly haunting, citing the acting and the direction and the visuals as brilliant, while others thought it was misogynistic and disgusting, claiming the plot was an incoherent mess and the characters were all unlikable. It was one of those movies that people said divided audiences, and in my experience, those can be some of the best films, because the division is usually a result of the movie being different somehow, and different is always going to be better than recycled, right? With horror movies, chill out, Greta. Let's take a closer look at John Carpenter's Vampires so you can decide which side of the fence you're going to plunge your stake into.
The plot.
The movie opens with a team of Vatican-endorsed vampire hunters conducting a daytime raid on an abandoned house in the middle of nowhere. The team's led by Jack Crow, played by the legendary James Woods, and his right-hand man is Anthony, played by, what's his name again? I'm a movie fan, I should know this. Hold on a second, everyone. I'm not trying to be a dick, dude. Which one of the Baldwins are you again?
I don't know.
See? It's not just me. Despite being louder than a rocket launch at a fireworks show during a Slayer gig, they sneak in undetected. And once they're inside, they find themselves amongst a pack of wretched vampires. So they shoot them and kick them and punch them and stake them and spike them, and some of them even get winched outside by Anthony, who's played by Heathcliff Baldwin. Yeah, we're going with Heathcliff. And don't pretend you knew which Baldwin it was. And after they lay the entire nest of vampires to rest, Jack's worried they never found the master vampire, Valak, and it turns out he was right to be worried. The gang heads to the local watering hole for some fun and frivolity, and it's the 90s, so everyone's naked and having a great time. That is, until the master vampire, Valak, arrives for some payback. He sneaks into James Woods' room where the prettiest, least diseased-looking prostitute, played by Cheryl Lee, is waiting for James. And why is she the cleanest and the prettiest? 'Cause it's James Woods. What are you, new? Valak does some unnecessarily adult things to her before he bites her in her thigh, turning her on and turning her into one of his own. Then he heads into the party room and tears the crew to shreds. And I've got to say, for a group of vampire hunters, these guys sure are shitty fighters. Where was your god when it mattered, boys? James Woods manages to get away with his prostitute and Heathcliff Baldwin. When they figure out the prostitute's been bitten, they treat her exactly how you'd expect James Woods to treat a prostitute in 1998. And after they knock her around for a bit, they decide to hang on to her so they can use her newly forming psychic connection with the master vampire to keep an eye on him. Think of the money James Woods could have had if he realized he inadvertently created the first ever sat-nav that you can have sex with. Heathcliff Baldwin steals them a car so they can head back to the motel to bury the team and burn the place down. And after that's done, James Woods reports back to his boss, Cardinal Stereotype. We also meet Father Adam, whose job is to tell we viewers everything we need to know about Valak. Allegedly, he was a disgraced priest who led a rebellion against the church, yada blah whatever. And all this bad behavior led to his execution, an eventual transformation into the first ever vampire. There was a lot going on in that last sentence, and there's a couple more sentences like that in this plot summary. My advice, if you want to enjoy John Carpenter's Vampires, switch off upstairs for a sec. Apparently, Valak's already killed another group of vampire slayers in Germany, so James Woods is told to form a new team and take Father Adam along with him. And this makes James Woods very angry, because if he just went along with his boss's instructions, the movie would be boring. Back in the hotel, Heathcliff Baldwin tells the prostitute she's been bitten by a vampire, and that they're trying to help her. And of course, Heathcliff Baldwin's version of helping her is the 90s version, so he takes off all of her clothes, tapes her mouth up, and ties her to the bed. But whatever, the movie's from like a century ago. Father Adams is gushing that he's in the company of the legendary James Woods. And James Woods hates that, because he's been dealing with that shit since the onion field back in 1979. So he cranks the steering wheel and sends the good father flying, before he kicks him up and down the desert. James Woods tells him Valak knew him by name, and that somebody must have set them up, but Father Adam's clueless. So after he's ruined the father's suit, James Woods dispels Father Adam's heroic notions of vampire hunting with language that would get him banned from every social media platform in existence today. I can't even reference it here on YouTube. Life was simpler and more enjoyable before the earth was Zuckerberged, that's for sure. After giving him the lowdown on how to actually kill vampires, he shows him a map that indicates the vampires are searching for something in the southwest. Back at the hotel, Heathcliff Baldwin displays his acting abilities when he pretends he can't finish a hamburger. He unties the prostitute to let her get cleaned up and falls asleep 9 seconds later, during the only period he needed to actually be awake. So the prostitute tries jumping to her death, but Heathcliff Baldwin isn't having it, and when he saves her, she bites him as payback. So he beats her up some more and cleans his wound and hides it, just in time for James Woods to return. And right after James Woods chastises Heathcliff Baldwin for beating up the prostitute, he beats up the priest for trying to make a phone call. The prostitute ends up having a very detailed vision of where Valak is and what he's doing. Based on her descriptions, James Woods decides to go after Valak without putting a team together. Father Adam believes that Valak's seeking an ancient relic called the Black Cross. And using the prostitute's psychic connection, the gang learns Valak's gathered 7 new vampire sidekicks. And they do that scene from every other 90s movie. And once he knows this, James Woods takes Father Adam into the hotel bathroom, where he beats the shit out of him for a change of pace. The father explains Valak's planning on completing his own exorcism, which will make him immune to sunlight. I told you earlier, turn off upstairs. And this makes James Woods so happy, he declares Father Adam an official vampire slayer and stops punching him too for a moment. Meanwhile, the vampires head to a Spanish mission where they slaughter all the monks so Valak can boost the Black Cross. They track Valak to a nearby abandoned town. They arbitrarily figure at least 30 new vampires have joined the party. Physically and psychologically beaten into the ground, Father Adam volunteers to act as bait for the bloodsuckers, allowing James Woods to harpoon them so Heathcliff Baldwin can drag him outside to their sunny deaths. Father Adam certainly means well, but he demonstrates how clueless he is when he holds a shotgun up in front of his face, meaning he hasn't even been trained as an actor on the set in real life. So what can we learn from all of this? All this lack of gun safety on film sets with Baldwins is no modern phenomena after all. They kick and punch and shoot and fight and harpoon again, and they do their best to wipe out the majority of them, but Valak and his gang get all jacked up once the sun goes down. James Woods ends up captured, Father Adam hides, naturally, and Heathcliff Baldwin fucks off with the prostitute, just in time for her to go full vampire and tear a lump out of Heathcliff Baldwin's burger-munching throat. James Woods' boss, Cardinal Stereotype, shows up and reveals himself to be Valak's buddy, and he's made an arrangement to become a vampire himself. But by divine coincidence, the ritual needs a priest and the blood of a crusader, specifically, our hero, James Woods' blood. Meanwhile, back on the road, Heathcliff Baldwin regains consciousness and is somehow still not a vampire even though he's been bitten twice. James Woods is put up on a cross and Valak drinks his crusader blood. But right at the last minute, Father Adam saves the day with his shotgun, but Valak holds up a bit of burning wood. Then Heathcliff Baldwin drives by and harpoons the crucifix, dragging the entire thing up the road at 40 miles an hour, which would probably kill most people. But not James Woods. In the final showdown between James Woods and Valak, James Woods wins. And I don't know what else you were expecting to happen. It's almost like you've never even heard of James Woods. And all that's left now is the prostitute and Heathcliff Baldwin. But James Woods is feeling particularly generous, so he allows the vampiric duo a 2-day head start before he tracks them down and Liam Neeson's them to death. And there you have it, the plot to John Carpenter's Vampires. Now, should you watch it, or should you take it into the toilet and kick the shit out of it?
The good bits.
The hero and the antagonist are both after the same thing in the Black Cross. There's a good balance between them. They both have strengths and weaknesses. They're both equally committed to the task. So the idea here is actually a good one. It's also kind of cool the church has traded in the traditional methods of fighting off evil with holy water and prayers. They've hired James Woods to kick and punch and shoot and harpoon it instead. And finally, rewatching this movie after not seeing it for about a decade, I can't tell you how refreshing it was to watch 90s horror again. It's full of unnecessary unnecessary violence. Father Adam took a beating like few I've ever seen, and for literally no reason. And poor Cheryl Lee got knocked out every third scene after she went vampire. The language was excessive and homophobic and racist and generally unacceptable in today's tight-arsed environment. I'm not feeling particularly nostalgic over any of these specific things, but I will say openly, I do miss a time when people were able to take a joke. The soundtrack and the set pieces felt like they were emulating Dusk Till Dawn, which came out 2 years earlier. That gives this movie a unique Western vibe. And what ties all this together is James Woods' ability to play this role straight. Heathcliff Baldwin isn't talented enough to do the same, but who cares? We've got James Woods.
The shite bits.
The pacing's hilariously bad. The scene when James Woods doused the hotel got as much screen time as the final fight did. The violence was also hilariously bad. It seemed like James Woods and Heathcliff Baldwin were being paid by the punch half the time. And with the exception of James Woods, obviously, the acting was also hilariously bad.
The verdict.
So, if you haven't seen John Carpenter's Vampires, should you watch it? Maybe. Depends on whether or not you're a dick. Despite being played seriously by James Woods, this is not a serious movie. And if you can appreciate this sort of thing, there are thousands of other movies far worse than this one in terms of plot and overall cohesion. If you've got a sense of humor, and you don't get triggered by every single fucking thing you see and hear and read and watch, check out John fucking Carpenter's Vampires. It's a fun couple of fucking hours. Until next time, folks. It's me, Johnny, from that thing you just watched. If you enjoyed it, go down there and smash me in the face to subscribe. And if you want to watch another thing, there's one right there. Do it!